You are listening to the Critical Mass Radio Show, Orange County's business talk show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Hello and welcome to Orange County's longest running business talk show. And yes, I am your host, Rick Franzi. And boy, do we have a good show planned for you. Why do you ask? Because we have Melissa Rimoldi here. She is the founder and CEO of Legion Force. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here. I think we're going to have some fun today.
I hope so. I'm looking forward to it. Every show is different, so let's see what yours is going to be like. I'm sure it's going to be a blast. But let's start with your origin story. Can you share with our audience the motivation, inspiration that you had for starting Legion Force?
Yeah, that's a big question. So I started in automotive when I was 23. And one of the things that remains constant is there's a lot of opposing agendas in the automotive arena, as well as, perceived, I would say, arrogance. I don't know if you're familiar with the automotive sector and gone to dealerships and all of that stuff. But again, it's just a crazy time right now. And it often runs parallel to what we're seeing today in the world, basically. So, as a result, we see a lot of disconnect. We see a lot of division. We see a lot of, misunderstood policies and procedures. And I think, this primarily is really coming from the dealer to the OEMs, the factory. Mm-hmm. And it is really part of my motivation, after 30 plus years of being in the business, is to really see how we can bring not only our trusted advisors and experts that have been in the field for 30 to 40 years plus, but really to join forces and try to shift the dynamics of what's going on and, looking at it from all different perspectives and angles. And so I'll explain just so you have a little bit of history and the audience has a little bit of history, but what we see traditionally on the OEM side, per se, is that, while there's a lot of differences, opinions, and ways to do things on businesses, it appears, at least since I've been in the business since the 90s, that the OEMs are traditionally in a mindset of taking the path of least resistance. And at the end of the day, we're still seeing the same vendors doing the same thing, checking the same boxes. And, it becomes a pain point for the dealers because the results are minimal at best. But I think because of the ease of, just having those relations, they know that if they try to flip the switch or change the direction of the boat that they're rowing, it just adds more complexity to the picture. And I think a lot of the times from the OEM perspective as well is that I think the biggest thing that gets more complex is when we lose sight of the customer experience. Mm-hmm. And, that also, equates to other hurdles in the marketplace and reputations and so forth and perceived.
Sure. That's interesting because most people's experience with a automotive brand is at their local dealership, mm-hmm. which is an independent business run by an owner of maybe a single outlet or, in this day and age, multiple dealerships. And so the Toyota that you buy, you're not really dealing with Toyota. You're dealing with someone who's a representative, if you will, of Toyota.
Yeah, the franchise dealers, right? And so they make a tremendous investment in the brick and mortar. And, they do a lot. In fact, I was at a dealership and they were spending over $1 million just on the windows. So, that adds up.
It does.
So, it's ironic because, again, the other thing when I was, branching off and talking about starting this company was having a variety of conversations, not only with my mentors and advocates, but also, the franchise dealers reaching out to me saying, can you please help us? And so that was the exciting part that really kind of inspired me to start off on this journey, is because, there's a ton of opportunities right now. And I think the time is now more than ever is to really kind of build those bridges and fill those gaps. And that's what we're, on the journey to do at this point.
All right. So let's understand Legion Force a little bit better. And maybe you could start by explaining, if when you got into the business, and did you have any pivots, any aha moments, even though you kind of knew, and you were just take us through the journey of what happened after you launched Legion Force, and then discuss for us the business model. What is it? Who are you helping? What problems are you solving?
Yeah.
And why are people reaching out to you?
Yeah. So when I first started Legion Force, I did hit several pivots. and I really didn't really understand all of the state requirements, all of the different solutions and platforms that you had to invest in. And it was a lot more than I ever anticipated, to be honest with you. And so right now I've got tons of disparate systems because I was in a panic mode of trying to file for taxes and do all these crazy things. But it's nice because I have a lot of successful entrepreneurs that have owned several businesses. And so they give me kind of like the do's and the don'ts and a little bit of that wisdom based on their learnings. So that's really helped tremendously.
So what is it that Legion Force does? What's the service? What's the offering?
So basically, yeah. So basically what we're doing is we're offering, as I said, it's a consulting firm, right? So based on the conversations of just being an automotive consultant, I started looking on LinkedIn and I started looking at all of the people, and it's just flooded in the market. And so I wanted to take a different approach. And I want to not only, provide consulting to franchise dealers, because what we see right now, especially post-pandemic, is that they are struggling from a point of lack of training, bandwidth, accountability, and oftentimes what we offer is what we call the vendor vitality. And so we go in and assess the vendors that they're enrolled with, and we look at the ROI and we analyze that. And I have some amazing trainers that go in store, and we actually train the sales force or the service team to actually utilize the services that they're enrolled with. Because I'm telling you right now, I'd say 80% of the platforms that they're enrolled in are not being utilized the way they were designed. So it's a huge, expense for the dealer, but it's also another way for them to better manage the customer experience.
So are you seeing, having been in the automotive industry pre-pandemic, as you said, since the 90s, then the pandemic hit, I think all of us probably have memory of driving by dealerships and seeing no cars on the lot or very few new vehicles available to be sold. Has there been a lingering change to the franchise dealership network based on what they experienced through the pandemic?
There's been a ton of twists and turns in the industry. And, in 2020, when the pandemic hit, everything was, we got to be online. We have to have, be able to communicate and transact with consumers online. So it was a mass push for this digital transformation. And that being said, with the microchip shortage, then we had some inventory and supply chain issues going on. It was a little bit of a cluster, partially open, partially closed. And then it was just, we are all over the place. And, post-pandemic, going into 2021, 2022, you started seeing like the inventory, and then, dealers were making a fat gross profit on the front end, because vehicles were limited. And so, a customer that wants that vehicle, that particular color, that particular model was going to go in and they were going to pay that price. So for a while, we were riding a great train of, making high profits on the front end. And then the used car came into play, used car market came into play. And then again, over time, we're now seeing that kind of flatten out. And so one of the other things that we're finding that's very important is not only, managing the front end of the business, but also the importance of dealer profitability on the back side of the business. So, the service absorption is what really keeps the dealers afloat on a profitability standpoint, especially when the fluctuations are happening on the front end. So sales are going up and down, but fixed operations or absorption is always that level of consistency that can, keep the doors open at a dealership. So it's an interesting dynamic. I don't think I ever want to go through the pandemic again.
Yeah.
But,
I think the dealers were very impacted by a lot of businesses were impacted by COVID. I think it's very public how car dealerships, especially here in Southern California, were impacted based on
well, I'll tell you, the dealers in Southern California are very creative. And so where there's a will, there's a way, and they will figure out how to sell, even if it's selling cars out of the service drive. Trust me, they are fierce when it comes to making sure that things get done and things happen. So
interesting. So let's look at you as an entrepreneur for a little bit. You were sort of talking about mentors, etc. I always like to ask founders, in those early days, ever feel alone as you were figuring out the business model and getting the company on its legs?
No, I've never really felt alone, honestly. And like I said, throughout my career, I've stayed very close and in contact with a lot of my leaders, and my colleagues, my team members, and it was basically like a family unit. So while we spread throughout different brands and different industries, whether it be tech industry, engineering, or what have you, we always stayed connected. There's like this web that, it's hard to explain because you just don't see that in the industry today. So in terms of being isolated, not really. I mean, it's just a phone call away. I will tell you that when I did leave corporate to jump to the vendor side is when I had the WTF shock syndrome. And I really had to have a lot of discipline to figure out a way to stay in routine. And what I did is I pretended like I was still going to the corporate office, got dressed, had my coffee, got ready, makeup, dressed up, and came into my office, shut the door, and it was just like I was, at the office in the ivory tower. So that was my first initial reaction. But since then, I've worked for several vendors. So working from home has become very easy for me.
Could you ever go back to being in an office 5 days a week?
Absolutely.
You could?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've worked from my home office since 2007, and I don't know that I would relish the idea of getting in my car and going to somebody's office every day. I so prefer this model.
Like I said, it's not for everybody, right?
Right? That's right. All right. So, piece of business advice. Is there something one of your mentors said to you, or a piece of foundational advice you can pay it forward and share with my audience today?
Well, they always had told me, and a really good friend of mine who's, brutally honest and blunt always said, when you're starting up a business, if you think of it like this, fact, bridge, benefit. So like, for example, with Legion Force, the fact is I can connect company A to company B, right? Which means that company A will get the exposure to scale their solutions. And then the benefit would see like a 20% savings in product development. And then the mutual benefit for A and B is to see that 50%, huge growth in profit margin. So that was probably one of the wisest things. So now every time I think about different offerings or different solutions, it's always the fact bridge benefit.
Mhm. That's kind of like a sales marketing message. And that's one thing that I have observed with founders and entrepreneurs. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable as an entrepreneur. You've got to be out there promoting your business, selling, talking to people, being willing to pitch your value proposition, maybe meet with some rejection on occasion. But if you're not comfortable doing that, it can be very difficult to get a new company off the ground.
100%. And I think, my success really has been really heavily weighted on not only my great leaders, but also just having the dealers as a sounding board. And that was really, the fact finding of how Legion Force evolved is through a lot of input and feedback from a grassroots level.
So tell me, what's the significance of the name you selected, Legion Force, for your company?
Well, that's funny. So I gave my daughter an assignment and I said, can you come up with a word that describes mom? And so she came up with Legion. So I went on and I tried to find the domain, and of course it was not available. So because Legion in her perspective meant mass force, don't ask me why she described me as a mass.
Okay. She
But
knows you.
it was that. So what I did was I ended up adding force to Legion Force. And that's where we came up with the name, and that's how it evolved. In fact, she was along my whole journey.
Wow.
She helped create the logo. And if you look in my domain for legionforce.com, the O is missing in force because I wasn't going to sit there and negotiate over a domain or anything like that. But she said that missing O is around the logo. So it was a very creative way to get it out there. We're a little different in that way.
That's great. It's nice to make it a family project too. So that's fantastic.
My kids are always involved. And, they've been so gracious throughout my career because I've had so much time on the road and traveling and trying to balance, the work-life balance and doing homework over the phone from hotels and, sometimes missing some of their sports events and stuff like that. But, they've been so patient and they're so respectful and grateful that it makes me to be a proud mama.
There you go. I wonder, for about a year now, I've been asking entrepreneurs this idea of artificial intelligence. It's, do you see it impacting your industry? Are you planning on leveraging it? Or are you currently using it
That's
inside
funny you
of
say
Legion
that.
Force?
Because currently my website is in AI.
Oh.
And honestly, I don't think it truly reflects my personality. And I don't think I'm getting my messaging across very clearly. So that's my experience with AI is that it's not 100% on intelligent enough to understand what I'm trying to convey. But I do plan on taking it in-house. And because I don't really know enough about AI, I think it's fascinating. And I do think that it has potential to make things more productive, albeit probably putting some people out of jobs. Now, the other side is there's still a risk because there's a lot of unknowns that I'm unfamiliar with. So it's definitely a topic and a subject that I'm going to be following very closely. But for now, you saw my experience with AI is, my website was the first one. So.
Well, thank you for that. That's interesting. And there's so much money being poured into AI development. It seems like every month there's some type of a breakthrough in one of the areas that could benefit from AI. Let's look to the future. Tell me, Melissa, you're going to be back on the show at some point. What's going to be?
Am I going to be back on the show again?
If you want to be, I'd like to have guests return and give us an update. So possibly. What's going to be different? What's your vision for the future for your firm?
So my end goal is to be the number one platform in the industry that will, serve up OEMs, dealers, and vendors who are basically seeking advice or counsel, whether it be on a key initiative, whether it be on a special project, whether it be a business challenge. And even to the point where, some of these vendors that are wanting to get into the OEM space want us to look at their suite of solutions and kind of give them some direction and some feedback and go to market strategies or speed to market strategies, through our vast network to help them get to that successful point that they're trying to reach. So I do believe, like I said, I'm straight to the point. Like there's nothing, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So if you've got it, you got it. If you don't, you don't. And I will be brutally honest about, telling you straightforward. I don't think you have anything. And I've sat on several pitches, and I've point blank told them, I don't know what you're doing, and I don't know what value you're bringing to the market. So that truth and honesty and level of integrity is what I stand by.
Yeah, on one hand, that's hard to hear, but on the other hand, it's better to hear that as early as possible so you don't spend too much time and money confusing the marketplace. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let me just say, I'll just put it that way.
Oh, I'm glad you speak the truth. That's very important. When someone would like to learn more about you or visit the Legion Force site, how do they find you online? Where do they go?
It's legionforce.com. So it's LEGIONFRCE.com. And then, of course, we have our social sites on there as well. So we're just excited to get the word out there and start building, this powerful community of experts that are really all focused on the want versus the have to. So we don't necessarily have to work, but we want to still keep working in what drives our passion. And I think that's the fun part about it, is that we're going to have more flexibility and autonomy, and we'll pick up assignments and projects that come in through the website, and we'll basically pick and choose what projects we want to work on and what ones we don't want to work on. So it's going to be exciting. I just, like I said, I just launched in February. So I'm very excited about, getting some brand awareness out there and really starting to get more avenues where I can get on social media and do some more podcasts and so forth, because what we're about to do is going to be explosive. It's going to be a little disruptive, and it's going to be all fun at the same time.
I can't wait. I appreciate you being a guest on our program, and thank you for your time today, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Rick.
And I'd like to thank the audience, whether you've listened to us live today or as a podcast or a copy of the video recording on my YouTube channel. You've been a part of Orange County's longest running business talk show. If you'd like to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn, Rick, R-A-C, Franzi, F-R-A-N-Z-I. Coincidentally, that's our company's website, rickfranzi.com. If you're an Orange County entrepreneur, you're a nonprofit leader here in Orange County, and you'd like to share your story with our audience, then reach out to me on LinkedIn or through our website. And Haley, our producer, and I will be happy to talk to you about possibly scheduling you on a future episode. Until we have a chance to be together again, I hope all of your business decisions will move your company in a positive direction.